You good over there, buddy?
I'm good to go.
Welcome to Freelancers, the freelance podcast, all about getting your freelance questions answered. And today I am joined by a very good friend of mine. We went to college together, and he is now an esteemed filmmaker, I'll call him. And he's a steamy filmmaker. And I think I pronounced that wrong the first time. And Griffin Hammond, thank you for joining me. And
Hi.
Griffin, I have been on your podcast probably enough times to warrant royalty checks.
Yeah. Especially since I think since you were on the podcast, we're now more regularly sponsored. So now we're actually bringing in money. I probably should send you something.
That's okay. I was going to ask how bad the views took a nosedive after having me on for like the third time. But well, Griffin,
it was 0 views third time. People were like, not again.
Done. Thank you for joining me. And just in case anyone who is watching this is unfamiliar with you, I doubt that they have never heard of you, but give us a little bit of background on yourself. And you can start from, our meet cute if you want, or you can just dive right into, your professional career.
Well, yeah, I mean, we both lived in Normal, Illinois, went to Illinois State University. That's where I did TV10 and learned a lot of the skills that I use now I now work in journalism covering politics, really. Mostly I'm covering the presidential election. But I think a lot of people know me from hosting Indie Mogul several years ago. That was kind of my first real video job after college. I also worked as a video producer at State Farm. And then I moved to New York. Actually, before I moved to New York, I made a documentary called Sriracha, which a lot of people know that film of mine. And then I moved to New York and I started working at Bloomberg Politics, covering the last presidential election. Now I work at a company called Recount Media, doing very similar work, covering the current presidential election. And in between, I've done a lot of freelancing. I spent kind of 3 years between those last two jobs, just doing 100% freelance. So I have some corporate clients too. And I still try to make a fair amount of DIY how-to videos on YouTube.
Cool. So for those of you who are listening and are not familiar, TV10 was the TV program that a lot of us at Illinois State University got involved in. It's a fully functional TV station. And sorts of stuff. And I think I share the background there where I learned like a ton of what I wanted to do or what I do now in those classes, and getting handed a camera and being told to go report on a news story or whatever the case was.
You want to know the number one piece of thing that I learned? I think I learned this from Rick Riccioppo.
Yes,
at TV10, that I still think about all the time. And I talk a lot of times when I'm like teaching someone who doesn't know how to use a camera very well, what to do when they shoot this kind of stuff, is a simple piece of advice. It was like, especially because we were stuck on sticks all the time, stuck on tripods. Anytime you're framing up a shot, go ahead and get a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close-up of like that one thing that you're shooting, because you're probably going to need all three in the edit. And I was just judging some student films, and my biggest feedback for any new filmmaker is always like, you need more B-roll.
Yeah.
Like you should have shot a lot more B-roll. And the easiest way to do it is just like every time you're framing up a shot, get a few versions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's great, man. It's really, really good advice. And I remember Rick would, if you would not use your tripods, Rick would go, "What is it, windy over there?"
Like that's why it's shaking.
Shaky, man. I'm not wired on caffeine trying to get through college. But I do the same thing even now, and learn the same thing where if I can't get a wide, medium, and a close up, I always try to get like 2 of the 3. I was out on a shoot a few weeks ago, and I realized that I had not done that. I hadn't had enough time, so I just had like 4 or 5 wide shots. And much to my chagrin, as I've been editing these past couple of days, I'm like trying to punch in on the 4K image to get like a closer shot, but it just it's not the same.
Yeah, it never looks as good.
No,
yeah.
Not.
A lot of times I feel like even when I shoot 4K, the most I'm comfortable going is like 125% or 150%. Like you start going past that and you you noticed that there wasn't as much clarity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally agree. And I can tell, I mean, I know people kind of poo poo the compression rates of everything on the internet. I can tell, even after it's been on YouTube and compressed or whatever, I can tell what shots I had in 4K. Even watching other people's work, you're like,
Yeah.
I bet that was punched in.
Yeah.
Um, Griffin, we met in college, and something that I think you and I both have and correct me if I'm wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong this entire podcast. I don't care. Anything that comes out of my mouth that's just horse shit, just correct me. But one of the things that I think both of us have I don't want to call it necessarily like an affinity for, but maybe a respect is probably a better word for, is education, and not necessarily like a college degree version of like higher education or a high school degree or whatever, but learning as you go through your careers. And I kind of want to talk to you mostly in this podcast about how you stay educated, and maybe some like tips and tricks that you have for people to stay educated, because I'm sure you get this probably even more so than me because of the success of like Sriracha and you being on Indie Mogul. But people will go like, do I need to go to film school? And there is a high education gets put on a pedestal, but there's different kinds of it. So I guess I just asked like 4 different questions. But to the education one, how do you personally stay educated?
Well, I may actually jump back and answer your question about film school first, and just say that I actually went to film school. I went to New York University for a year and a half or 2 years, but I failed out of film school. And so I do think it's valuable. I'm sure I got some good skills out of it, but I really do think back mostly to my TV10 live news kind of days as where I actually learned a lot of the skills that I use now. And that was after I went to NYU. So I think in high school, they make it seem like it's so important which college you go to. And in the end, I went to an expensive private film school. I also went to a community college, and I went to a four-year public institution, Illinois State University. And all of them gave me great tools.
Yeah.
And one of them was like 10 times more expensive than the others. Like when you take an English class, I mean, granted, I think my English class at NYU was pretty good, but it wasn't like 10 times better. It was maybe like 20% better. So I think get an education wherever you can get it. And most of the skills that you learn that you need to know for freelancing, for the kind of filmmaking we do, you don't need to go to film school for that. You can watch 10 hours of YouTube videos and be pretty skilled if you're just practicing your craft.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I mean, I didn't go to film school necessarily. Actually, I didn't go to film school. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have done well. I probably very honestly would have had a similar route to you, where, I don't think I would have jived with it as well.
Right.
And I mean,
I think for me, it was a combination of like, I felt like I already knew a lot because I am kind of a self-learner. I'm curious. I tried to teach myself a lot of filmmaking before I ever got there. So it felt like for the first couple of years, I was just like waiting for where are the real classes. And then the other half of it was just, I probably wasn't ready for college at 18. I probably was a little bit immature. And I think I could just sense that this wasn't the kind of filmmaking I wanted to do. I didn't want to be on these giant teams of filmmakers that end up in Hollywood and you're the second lighting gaffer. I don't even know I still don't know the terms in filmmaking.
No.
I like being the guy that shoots and the guy that edits, and you can't do that on a big project.
Yeah. I think very honestly, that's probably why we both have taken, probably the paths that we have. And specifically in regards to freelance, is that chalk it up to like control issues or something, but like,
right. I think it's what it is.
I don't want to go onto a set and be told by like 7 layers of people what to do. I went and helped out on a short film up in Chicago one time, and it was just infuriating. There was so much there was a lot of downtime because you're waiting for all the orders to come down. And then you have like such a little amount of time to get stuff done, before they start rolling and doing all this stuff. And then, because, shit rolls downhill, you're always like the person who got yelled at, and I didn't really care for it. It seemed like
Yeah.
a toxic environment, to be blatantly honest. And not to say that it was one set, and
Right.
that's not indicative of the whole industry, but
And in the kind of productions we do, we're certainly limited in what we can accomplish. We can't make a giant sci-fi epic Hollywood movie. And there are people that's their dream, and they need a 300 person team, essentially a company to build a film for them.
yeah.
But I like being able to just start shooting something right now and be done.
No, I totally agree. And there's a flexibility in that I really appreciate, and like a nimbleness.
Yeah.
A one-man band, or operating by myself, with limited crew here and there. A production assistant or two, a second shooter now and again, even like an assistant editor. But at that point, it's still real small. I mean, there's not like layers of hierarchy and stuff that are going on.
Yeah.
So I think we just solved the problem of don't go to film school. I mean,
Although I feel like the one thing I didn't really answer was like, where do I learn things?
now how do you learn right now?
Well, I think the way I always put it for people, like people always ask, like, how do you learn to edit? And I always feel like filmmaking is something where you just have to start doing it. You can't like play around and learn it. You can't just like open up the editing software and start moving things and see how it works. You really need to have a goal in mind. So I think whatever you want to learn, I think I've always felt like the best way to learn is just to create a project that's going to stretch your boundaries, that's going to force you to do some things you don't know how to do. And then when you start shooting and you realize, oh, I don't know how ND filters work, but I probably need one. Then you go watch someone's YouTube video. I have a very good ND tutorial.
What are we, 5 minutes in on?
Yeah. Head on over to youtube.com/Griffin Hammond.
Yeah, it's a great resource. I do pop by your channel on occasion when I'm like, oh shit, I forgot how to do this. And I'll go over to.
I do it too, which is funny. I watch my own tutorial videos sometimes because, like, when I'm making a tutorial, I learn everything about the subject and I've become an expert in that moment. And then I make a video, and then a year later, I probably don't remember all those things that I put into a video. And so I sometimes reference my own work to be like, that's how I did it.
I can confirm that your memory is really horrible. Before we started recording, I was trying to tell Griffin about a project that I was the star of, and he filmed, and we worked for like a weekend, and he had no recollection of it whatsoever.
At first, and then I remember.
But
yeah, I think you start working on something, and then when you're in the edit and you don't know how to do a particular effect, you just Google that thing. I feel like that's how I learn, is like one skill at a time. Like, oh, I don't know how to use After Effects at all. So someone teach me how to do this basic thing. And soon you've piled a bunch of these things on, and you actually know how to use a piece of software.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there is that, yeah, you're not going to learn everything at once, no matter what set you get onto or what project you're working on. It's, these little bitty skills that build up over time. There's stuff that, I have taught how to edit on Adobe Premiere Pro for 7 years now, and I still have to Google how to do things. And I still rely on people that, I'm not going to, there are a lot of people that are better than me at editing, and I do rely on them, but other people's skill sets are just a little bit different, than mine. And I try to, get information from them, and I hope like, vice versa at some point. But yeah, I think that's a really important thing. It's just, learning in like incremental kind of steps, and trying to figure out like maybe what you don't know. So as you're editing and you're like, oh, yeah, I really like to do I'm just going to say star wipe, because I feel like I saw one in like Star Wars or something recently. I really want to do a star wipe. And then you just Google how to do that, in Premiere Pro, or,
Yeah.
How do I?
Well, and I got really lucky that at my current job, when I started back, it was like a year and a half ago, we were still in the office. This was pre-COVID. And I knew going into this job that everyone was going to be a Premiere editor, and I'm a Final Cut Pro 10 editor. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. But I knew it was important that I used to know how to use the software. So I was like, I can pick it back up again, even though it's 10 versions later. I think the last time I used Premiere was like in college, probably at ISU. And so I spent a couple days trying to learn it on my own. I think I picked up a few skills. I realized pretty quickly I was going to need all the keystrokes to be different. Like, so I just made all the keystrokes mapped to exactly the same as Final Cut, which is kind of the first cool thing I learned about Premiere. I didn't realize you can really map almost any function to any key, which is better than Final Cut. Final Cut doesn't let you map everything.
Yeah.
Or map anything, I don't think.
Yeah, I haven't used Cut since college. The inverse of your.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things with Premiere. And when I teach it, when people are like, "Hey, I've come from Final Cut," and I'm like, "Hey, there's actually, you can go up and I can't remember, maybe like Final Cut 7 or something is the last. You can actually import those keys, but then you can also, if you are, you have your own set of keystrokes or whatever that you like to use, you can go in and tell Premiere to use that, which is super, super.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Premiere doesn't have Final Cut 10 keystrokes because they're so different. Like Final Cut kind of reimagined how they do editing. Like there's whole functions that didn't exist before. Like there's a button that's like append to the end of the timeline, which you can't do in Premiere, I don't think, but it makes a lot of sense for like, if you're the kind of editor who just wants to like add something and then another thing and then another thing and then another thing to the timeline, and then later you go in and reorder it. But I spent a few days trying to learn Premiere, got relatively comfortable with my keystrokes. But then when I was sitting in the office, it was nice that I was surrounded by other Premiere editors. And so I just started shouting things out. At first, it was kind of frustrating. It was like, wait, why can't Premiere do this basic thing that I think is really important? But they kind of helped me figure out like, well, you don't really need to do that. You can kind of do it with this tool. Like at first I was trying to use like a crop tool in Premiere and realized, oh, the built-in masking tool is actually really powerful in Premiere and easy to use. And then eventually I'm doing things in Premiere that like adjustment layers that I don't think Final Cut has built in. So I just never used adjustment layers much. But now that I'm a Premiere editor in my full-time job, I'm using these new skills like adjustment layers that I just never used before. And it really only took me like 2 or 3 days to become pretty proficient in Premiere. So I think really I think it's a good testament to like, if you have a project that forces you to dive in and just do it, you could pick up some new skills really fast. And now I feel like I could definitely teach a Premiere class. Except for the keystrokes. Like, I don't know how I would teach it because I'd be like, well, first you have to change all your keystrokes to mine.
Yeah. We're gonna
because mine are
import Griffin Hammond dot keystroke. Whatever. That's really funny. I mean, I think at the end of the day, one thing that is helpful is once you start to get some of the basics down. I mean, when you're coming from Final Cut, I mean, there's still a timeline. There's still a bin with all of your footage in it.
Yeah.
Still preview monitors. There's still program monitors or whatever you want to call them. You still have to export, you still have to render. There's still a lot of similarities. It's just the interface is a little different. The keystrokes are a little wonky. And I mean, it's like, if you're going to learn a different language and you got plopped down in a country where you didn't speak the native language, or you had maybe a little bit of information about it, you could probably pick it up pretty quick because you have to,
Yeah. Well, language is a good metaphor because psychologists talk about how there's research that suggests that people who are bilingual, not only are you able to communicate with different people, but your brain can conceive of different ideas. Like language can open up ideas that weren't available in English, but maybe they're available in German in a way that like you can actually think differently. Your brain can come up with new ideas. And it's the same with editing, that by jumping to a new piece of software, I'm suddenly realize there are new things I didn't know were possible, or it forces me to come up with a new solution to the same problem I had before. And maybe it comes up with a different result. And I go, oh, wow, this actually looks really cool. I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think one of the, when I'm trying to do something maybe in Premiere and I get stuck, something that I do almost immediately is I try to think of, could I do something similar in After Effects? Because there's a really good, what's it called, where you can just open a project, you can just send something straight to After Effects, the dynamic link that they have.
Yeah.
And then you can edit After Effects sequences that import and update, in real time in Premiere. And I try to do that too. I'm not some sort of like bilingual editor.
Right.
my brain is pretty slow in a lot of ways, but it's a really good point, and it's really fascinating bit of information about that. I did not know that about people who speak multiple languages, but it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, English and the only other language I know a little bit of is Spanish, and the way the languages are structured, it makes sense that you would have like a different mindset even to understand these languages. And same with probably the editing programs that we use.
Yeah.
Cool. So, being self-taught is something that clearly we're both part of, or both a product of rather. And, in addition to our college educations and whatever else we've done, one of the things that I feel like younger editors in particular, and younger filmmakers are, I guess, too, but they struggle with how to Google things. And I don't know if you have any like tips or tricks on how you do. So let's say you're trying to figure out how to do an effect, but you actually don't know what it's called. How would you like go about that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like where people,
Well, it's funny. This is what I wrote my
Yeah.
master's thesis about, was the concept of media search literacy, which is, do you have the literacy on the internet to find the particular media you want to consume if you don't know what it's called? And so, yeah, it is a skill set to try to understand. Although I feel like Google has gotten so good. Like when I wrote that thesis in 2009,
yeah, probably around there.
you really did have to be pretty skilled to craft a search. And now you could practically just type in the question,
Yeah.
and it'll probably pop up with
Know what
someone else had the similar question.
you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think knowing where to look is important, like knowing that you probably need a YouTube tutorial rather than a blog post. Like, just searching on Google might end up with a bunch of news articles or something that are not going to help you know how to find a particular effect in Premiere. But when you look in YouTube, there's so many how-to tutorials. You're probably gonna have someone do a screen capture, walk you through exactly how to do masking in Premiere, and then you can learn how to mask in Premiere in 12 seconds.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite things now is when you do a Google search and like the first result is just like a section of a clip. It's not even the full YouTube video. It's just like a section.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, we think you might be interested in like this 22 seconds of this video.
Right. I like that a lot too. Yeah.
It's really, really handy.
I get disappointed though in like the video tab results on Google.
I don't care for those.
So I usually just skip straight to YouTube. If I search on Google and I don't immediately see something that looks like the answer, then I go to youtube.com and write in the search bar there, I'm looking for
.com/Griffin Hammond, and you search in his channel, right?
Yeah. And also I'm looking for length. Like most of the time it's a very simple thing I want to know how to do. It's like, I know Premiere can do X. I just don't know what it's called. I don't really understand how the keystrokes work in this particular effect. And so I just want like a 2-minute tutorial. If I land on something that's 20 minutes, I know that it's not going to answer my question very effectively.
No. And I think one of the problems that I have with those kind of tutorials is, when you're going to, when you're looking for one of those, they want you to like start to finish, do this tutorial with them, because they've got like a goal in mind. They want you to create this kind of video at the end of it, where you're like, no, I just want to know how that one tool works. I don't need to get into like a whole production to do it. I find that really frustrating, but I have a different learning style than other people. And I'm sure some people find that handy, I guess. Cool. Yeah. I totally forgot that, that you had, been there. You stayed after Illinois State University to get your master's. And I'd gone away for a couple of years and came back. I don't know if there's any overlap for us in grad school. But
I don't even remember, because we were both like around, like we still hung out. So like,
we also like those, the like British urchins, street urchins, they only have like the halvesy gloves that peer through frosty windows. We were just like that.
Yeah.
And Illinois.
I should point out that you definitely don't need a master's for the line of work we're in.
That's right.
I just, some professors suggested that I stick around, and they were like, oh, and you can get it for free. You can just work for the university.
Yeah.
And I wasn't eager to leave college yet. I was enjoying learning. And so I stuck around.
Yeah, I had I left for a couple of years to work, and then the recession was starting in like 2008, 9, or in full force, and freelance work was hard to find. So I just was like, well, I'll go back to grad school. Um, I unfortunately did not get it for free. We'll be paying that off till I'm about 82, and if it's a rough year like 2020, I'll be like 85 before I get it paid off. But it is wild. I think back, and um, I learned a lot from getting my master's degree. But yeah, it makes, like, there is not a client on earth that when I tell them I have a master's degree and I deserve more money, like they don't even care.
Yeah.
Any,
Yeah.
there's nothing to it.
I think it helped me to spend more time studying communication. I took some more research methods sort of courses. It probably made me better at at being critical of research I read and understanding how it came to its result. I think there probably are a few communication skills that I've learned to better communicate with my clients or to make a more effective video that's going to reach an audience. But those were all things, you could learn that in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think it was useful. The main thing I got out of it was that you can teach at the university level when you have a master's degree.
Yeah.
Not like a high paying job, but it's fun.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, this is 2020 is the first year that I haven't taught any college classes in um, maybe like 7 years since grad school.
Yeah.
8 years, which is I do like. I think that I too think that it gives you it gives you some good insights into how to um, into your media literacy. Really, into being a critical thinker, in a critical consumer of media, and of whatever whatever content you want to talk about. Um, and I kind of going off this, Griffin, I want to talk to you about some researching for projects, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you do now, and I've been watching these videos prior to the election, I haven't watched as many since. Sorry.
Yeah.
But you working with, is it The Recount, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like two different things. It's like The Recount is like our online brand, and then the company is called Recount Media. So whatever you want to call it.
So The Recount is the one that I watch, is the one I'm familiar with, is the online stuff. And you do, prior to the election, there's a lot of, really good, kind of like motion graphics based educational videos on, the electoral college, and, a whole variety of things. When you're doing projects like this, I'm just using these as an example. So if you want to talk about, Sriracha or any of your other projects, feel free. But when you're doing a project, what kind of research are you having to do? And, where do you go?
Yeah.
Online, or do you go to your local library? How do you even start that?
Well, there's probably two kinds of research that I'm doing on most of these projects. And one is like fact checking. One is like getting the story and making sure all the details are right. But the other half is researching like what content is available to tell this story. Because I like to exhaust all the options. I kind of want to know that I've like fully explored the world of the thing I'm going to talk about. So it makes me nervous when I try to talk about subjects that are so massive that there's infinite amount of research to do. I love a topic that's small, like, this event that happened on a single day. I love like diving into something, because then you really could seek out every single piece of media about that event that happened, maybe it's 30 years ago. I do some archival stuff. So if it's an archival film, I'll go straight to AP Archive, which is, we pay for a subscription to the Associated Press. So we get all their photos and we get all their archival footage, and they have archival footage that goes back more than 100 years. Some of it is like they've licensed from other sources, like a lot of British movie tone newsreels from like the 1930s are in the AP Archive.
Like every reporter sounds the exact same.
Yeah.
It just sounds like the most stereotypical. It sounds like someone making fun of a white guy, which is totally.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what? Do people sound like that?
So I have my sources that are related to archival stuff, AP Photos, AP Archive. There's free services like C-SPAN is available online, and you can download those videos if you know how. And Um, there's archive.org,
Yeah, that's a good one.
which is a pretty good resource, especially if you are not paying for subscriptions and need news clips, because archive.org pretty much archives all news clips, I think going back 8 years. It's kind of like a rolling, like, that's the problem. If I'm doing a story about something 9 years ago, then I don't get any archive.org clips. But if you're doing something in recent history, you can look up Fox News clips and NBC News clips and whatever you want on archive.org. But yeah, I'm trying to find the richest media there is. And I also want high quality media. I'd rather show the 4K version of something than the 640 by 480 version of something if I can.
Yeah.
And then once I kind of have a handle on the universe of what's available as footage, then I can start to write my script. I'm kind of doing both at the same time. I'm like, as I'm researching, I'm pretty much making a timeline for the story I'm building. Like, it's probably important for me to know when I talk about the Electoral College, like what happened in every 4-year presidential election electorally. And I think the story I was doing about the Electoral College was this thing called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is this idea to kind of override the Electoral College. And so I'm, it's important for me to know when they advance some of the legislation. So I'm kind of writing all this down in a list. And then when I know what footage there is, I can kind of write to that footage in the script. Like, oh, well, I know what kind of cool B-roll I want to show. So let me make sure the voiceover says something that will evoke that idea. And if I have a cool soundbite, I better write away into it.
Yeah, like a lead or something like that.
Yeah. And then after that, once I'm finishing up the script, then I'm fact checking. And it's like, this is the part that I just can't believe it takes as long as it does. Because it's amazing how you could barely write a single sentence in a newsy way without having to check like 3 things. It's like, when I say this happened a week ago, last week this happened, it's like, well, I better go double check. Was it actually on Monday or did it happen on the Friday before that?
It just got reported on Monday,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always looking at like, can I find a couple sources that confirm that it happened on a certain day? Because amazingly, news will get these basic details wrong sometimes. I mean, especially when I'm doing like archival films. Sometimes a newspaper will say something happened on a Tuesday and then you check 2 other sources and you're like, no, it says it happened on Monday. It just so happened this one reporter 40 years ago got the detail wrong and their editor didn't catch it.
Yeah.
So little things like that. I do a lot of data driven stuff. And when I claim that the government did something in 2012, I want to make sure that the source I'm looking at is actually the government data. There's probably some PDF on the EPA's website that says the thing I'm saying, even though I originally learned about the fact through the New York Times or something.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating. And I think it's one of the things, and I don't do a ton of research in the same way that you do, but when I'm researching a project, the internet is like your best friend, but it's also like your worst enemy, because there's almost like too much stuff, even if you are focused on like a single day, or a single event or something like that, sifting through and trying to find like credible sources and not just like guywithblog.org or
right.
You're like,
well, to me, the most amazing thing that I've learned through doing all these kinds of films for the recount is we think of the internet as this great repository that has every piece of data is somewhere. But especially as I do archival films, I realize how much information is just like lost to history. And I remember, like back in college, like when I was in community college, I think I was in a history class and I was doing a story about something that happened in San Francisco in the 60s. And I actually had to go to University of Illinois to access their microfiche machines to read these old newspapers because they were the only university around that had access to these. And it's still, I feel like it's still that way, but people just don't realize it. Like there's probably whole newspapers that were never digitized because they weren't important enough. In like a very racialized way, I'm trying to do a story about the polio vaccine, and there's all this reporting from Black-owned newspapers in like the 40s and 50s about polio. And those newspapers haven't been digitized because they were like small indie Black-owned newspapers. And I'm sure they exist somewhere. Like I probably need to go to Mobile, Alabama and get on a microfiche machine to find these things. And I just won't be able to do that. So some things are just lost. And I find that even with like things that you would think would be pretty basic, like what's the viewership of the 1984 presidential debate?
Yeah.
Or like, what was the number of votes in an election in 1930? Like, amazingly, some things that sound very like straightforward and basic, and you think would be no problem to find. Sometimes I made up those examples, but like things like that will just be like missing. And you're just like, what? Does no one know? Everyone knows like who became president this year, but they don't remember. No one wrote down how many votes there were.
Yeah, I think that that's as I wiggle around with my video here. Yeah, I think that that's really fascinating. And I was actually I was working on or trying to work on another racially a project that deals with race, and
Yeah.
and that was what we were finding, was that there was some stuff going on here in the community, and it was not reported on.
Yeah.
The stuff's archived in newspapers somewhere, but it's not available. I mean, it is available to the public somewhere, but you just got to find
Right.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's great that you have so much information at your fingertips, but then when you also have when it's wherever you're at. I mean, I know where you're at, but like you don't have to give addresses or anything. But when you have like when you have to like drive somewhere to now do your microfiche stuff, it's so much more of a pain, and it gives you a lot of respect, I think, for what people used to go through, what reporters,
Yeah.
journalists used to go through, and people that did documentaries, like documentary filmmakers, like driving all around to get these things, where you could do it digitally now, really easily.
Well, and in a similar, more video oriented way, a thing that happens to me a lot is, like a debate, a presidential debate was filmed. It was on film, and it's been digitized up to the Library of Congress. But the Library of Congress did the digitizing in 1996 or something, so it's standard definition, low res, and it's like, this is the only copy I can find. Every YouTube video this is like, anything that's in the Library of Congress is pretty much probably public domain, because it's owned by the government and we as taxpayers have paid for it. So, people will take these videos off the Library of Congress and like put them on YouTube, and you'll find, like you're searching like the Nixon Kennedy debate, and every YouTube video is like this low res thing, and you go and you find the source and you're like, oh, it's also low res, and you're just wondering like, but it's on film. All someone would have to do is like redigitize it, and it's in 4K.
Like, would they shoot it with
It's just
Canon like GL2 against a wall or something?
right, yeah. So there's that kind of limitation. Like you know this stuff exists, but it just isn't always accessible to you.
Yeah, and you might have some input on this too, or some thoughts on this. But something that I've found when I'm trying to, maybe I find something and it's not as high res as I want, whether it's an archival photo or something. I'm working on a project right now that is dating back, 50 years at this point, and they've got some photos, and the photos themselves, I'm sure, are really high res, but for whatever reason, the copies I have of them are as high res as they got, and they're not great. So I have to find creative ways around utilizing those in my project. So, instead of having a full screen of this photo from the late 60s or 70s, maybe I have like an insert of it with some text on the screen.
Yeah.
I think that there are some creativity. There's some creativity that comes with those limitations, and it's kind of stinks, frankly, in a lot of ways when you're trying to do that. But I think that, and maybe you can speak to it a little bit too, because, with your archival stuff and how visual, what you're doing is, I think that it makes you think differently in coming
Yeah.
solutions.
Well, a lot of times I'll throw some sort of texture on top of it, like a film grain, and set the transparency to like overlay, or you can mess around with the different compositing settings, as you can kind of add grain to something to distract, and it kind of makes it look like there's more texture and sharpness to it than what appears in the original photo. And a lot of times I am so I'm so obsessed with getting the highest quality that a lot of times if I find a really bad photo, I'll try to do a reverse image search, take it to tineye.com or Google Photos and see if I can find the original. Like, did someone else post, this is the popular one that was on BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
And so I can find it, but maybe they took it from, it's like a meme that's gone through 40 generations and maybe someone posted it 5 years ago and it's a higher res version.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to do it. I've done that on occasion for, this, for whatever reason, this happens with logos all the time. So like a client will, hey, I've got a logo you can use at the end of the video. It's in like my email signature. And it's like,
yeah,
I think I'm like,
that happens to be a lot too. Yeah, people will send you the worst version. You're just like, I can go find the right one.
And so I like do like a reverse Google image search and then it's fine. But I'm like, as like a business owner, shouldn't you have like a high res like Illustrator or EPS file, whatever. I'm not gonna,
Yeah. The only thing to be careful about there that I've learned is like, because like Squarespace is a sponsor for my podcast and they made a very subtle change to their logo in the last year. And I don't know if I even would have noticed, but they were looking at one of my videos and they were like, oh, I see you're using the old version. Could you change to the new version that like treats the Q slightly differently? Yeah. It's like they changed it from the line at the bottom of the Q that intersects the circle. It changed from a line that actually intersected to a line that just pops out the bottom.
Yeah. Like you would never that unless you were looking at like every
right
high res.
Yeah. But yeah, anytime you're working with logos, just make sure companies go through rebranding all the time and you want to make sure you're up to date.
Yeah. If it looks like it's an outdated logo, it might just be the company because sometimes that happens. Right. But you're like, does this really look like it was updated last in the 90s? And you're like, yeah, guess so. So Griffin, I don't want to take like a ton more of your time, but I have about 42 more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, 42 questions. Great.
Yeah, they really are. Oh no, I'm sorry, 41. We got the last one answered. So Griffin, I want to talk about something maybe a little softer, we'll say, than all this, than us bashing on
an archival presidential politics,
bashing on client logos and stuff. So both of us right now, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Both of us are working from home. How has that like impacted how you work? I mean, maybe what are some things that you've, as a freelancer, both of us have worked from home probably than almost any other career, arguably. But, how is working from home fully impacted, kind of what you're doing and how you work maybe?
I mean, I think the biggest thing I miss out on is being in a newsroom environment where you can just shout out, I need help, or who has this? Although we're at my office, we're on Slack, and it's been pretty effective. Luckily we were using Slack a lot before COVID, so it wasn't too much of a change for all of us to head home. For me, it's little things like that you take for granted from leaving an office. Like in the winter now, the room that I'm in gets really cold. And so I have to run a space heater down by my feet, mostly to keep my hands warm because my hands I have like thin hands. And when my fingers get cold, it hurts to type. And you just you don't think about that. Like, oh, I'm going to have to make this a hospitable office. I'm going to have to take on some of that load that my office was doing for me, managing the temperature and bringing me snacks. And
that's a good point. I actually, Jordan, my wife, started working from home earlier this year, like everyone else. And it's just one of those things where I didn't realize how chilly the office I worked in was getting. And then she was like, how do you work in here? It's freezing. And you could see her breath. And I'm like, what? So yeah, we had to get like a little space heater and it is, some of those kind of creature comforts almost, making sure that you have extra coffee or, whatever you drink, things. And
then I have to structure my day around my son is in the house. And I mean, we're doing the podcast right now while he's napping, which is this is my normal time of day to do a shot like this. I'm scripting in the morning and I know I have a deadline at the end of the day. And I know that the only time I'm going to get a chance to turn on my lights, have some quiet, not that he's like a raucous child, but like he's fun. He's going to be yelling something in the other room if he's not asleep.
Yeah. And you don't want to go out there and be the dad that's like, how dare you laugh? How that mirth has no place in this home. You know, like you can't do that. You got to just be like, whatever. Like I yell at my pets every once in a while and I'm like, they're animals, you know, if they don't get it.
Yeah.
Which I actually am surprised I haven't seen any of them really since I started talking. I don't know, maybe I lost.
I also think there's an adrenaline that you get in the office with your coworkers that for me, I've always noticed as a freelancer, my biggest problem with being a freelancer is that because I'm alone, and I like being alone, I'm an introvert, but after lunch, I always fall into like a food coma that if I were in an office, I would get over because there's like people yelling at you and saying hi. But when I'm by myself, it's easy just to like fall into a funk after lunch. And so I kind of structure my day like I better do all my intense research and scripting in the morning because I just know I'm not going to be as good at it. I'm going to be like that writer's block staring at the screen guy at 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And so I better make sure that's when I'm editing, not when I'm writing.
Yeah.
Because I can edit, not that editing is thoughtless, but like once I've scripted something and recorded things, once I have things in a timeline, it's kind of more like problem solving, like move this thing, do that thing.
Yeah. It's like you've already like driven to the store, gotten the puzzle, unwrapped it, put it out on the table. It's like, you can do it while you're almost doing something else, almost the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's something that a lot of freelancers struggle with. I know I did early on was like, there's like an X factor ambiance when you're in an office. There's, there's always the like person who's coming by to talk and you get irritated at it and then you don't have it anymore. And then it is like 2:30 and you've had lunch and, you're like, oh man, you find yourself staring at a screen or, doing something real slow at like half speed.
Yeah.
I think I even told you that this is 1:30, 2:30, it's like 2:30 now, but when we were scheduling this, I was like, hey man, I'm like a total like drag after lunch. I just
right.
like right before we got on and it is, it's I'm energized talking to you. And I actually just put like a bunch of whiskey in my ginger ale. It's just in half. So I'm pretty but yeah, that afternoon time is hard to get through. And I think structuring your day accordingly, like being honest with yourself and going, hey, I know I need to get the hard stuff done right away in the morning when I'm like, perky, I've got caffeine, I'm ready to go, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Great. And I know you get your little guy around somewhere too. How's, what's it like, you've got a spouse there too to help out. How's that, like, how does that like work? Cause, Jordan's like always working, but we don't have a kid running around. Is that like, are you like glad that you get to spend a lot more time with the family like around? Or are you just like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best part about working from home is getting to see my family so frequently and structuring my workday in such a way that I'm very present as a parent in the morning. And then, I now tell Peter I'm going to work and I just like go down the stairs and he says work and he gets it too. He says, like he'll be in the middle of asking me to do something. And I'm like, I'd love to do that right now, but I do need to start my work day now. I need to go to work. And he just goes, work. Okay. Bye dad. See ya.
That's cute.
And then he comes down, he'll come down and visit me, like bring me a snack. And then we all eat lunch together. And then I come back and I work some more. And then I see him at the end of my workday. And, I can be flexible about if I need to do more editing, I can stay up late and
Yeah. I like that aspect of, I don't like that aspect. I appreciate that aspect of what we do is that, if I've got a project that I need to get done or, let's say I can't sleep or, everyone else in my house has fallen asleep and I've got a little bit of energy. I'm like, well, I can go edit for an hour and it's really low impact. I can do it in my pajamas,
yeah.
And get that done if you need to, which I really appreciate.
Well, yeah, when Peter was first born, we were still living in New York in a small apartment and I was doing a lot of corporate freelance work, and I had some big projects that I really needed to finish. We'd already shot them overseas, and I just needed to like do all the editing. And at that time, he was an infant, and so his sleeping schedule is like he's
All
sleeping every 3 hours, and then he needs a lot in between, and so he's crying, and so I kind of felt like the only way to be like an attentive parent and also get this work done was just like wait till nighttime. Like I think I was like waiting till 11 p.m. every night, and then I would do 3 hours of editing. um, but that I guess that was the nice part about being a freelancer is sometimes the timelines are a little bit longer than like a news deadline.
Yeah, it's I do appreciate that about, you don't have to, necessarily work late into your evening and then get home late, for dinner or whatever. You get to see your family. And I think that there's a nice like work-life balance, particularly with other people working from home now too. I think it's really nice. It's been pleasant. It's certainly a weird thing to experience, but it's been nice so far.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we're 40 more questions. Okay. Yeah,
I'm curious from you how I kind of exist in this world where now I have a full-time job and I maintain a few freelance clients, but I've noticed, especially like big corporate clients during COVID kind of pared down their marketing budgets because they're kind of unsure about like, do people even want to hear my message about ice cream while while the pandemic's going on? Like, what kind of impact have you seen on your prospects?
This was a rough year, frankly.
Yeah.
So so Jordan and I moved into a different community. We moved from Bloomington Normal to Champaign, which, for those of you not looking at a map or familiar with Central Illinois, they are like 45 minutes away. They're not too different of communities. And when we moved, I tried to keep it fairly quiet because we had a lot of freelance clients that were like, well, what about the project we have in 3 weeks?
Yeah.
I'll drive 45 minutes and film it.
Yeah.
I'm not, I didn't move down to like Texas, man.
Right. Yeah. This was California. A 45-minute commute would be no big deal around LA, but yeah, in Central Illinois, people are like, you've left forever.
I know. So we tried to keep it quiet. But because, Champaign has a pretty good group of freelancers that have been here for a while. I mean, it took me a while to really get a stranglehold on the Bloomington Normal community after you left. Thank you for leaving and leaving me.
Opened up some market share.
But it took me a while to get a good freelance client base. And clearly I have clients all over the place. But, when I moved into town here, I think it was like last November, I was like, you know what? I don't know what, the early 2020 is going to hold. Coronavirus wasn't a thing. I'm sure you can relate to this, where like December, January, and February are normally like really low months in terms of freelance income.
Yeah.
Some editing, but no one wants to film in Illinois. It's, this
right.
looks overexposed, this window behind me, but it's literally just a crappy area. So actually I stopped taking a salary like last November, and then I had one really big project in March, and it was the week that the travel ban went into effect, and it was this week-long trade show out in Vegas. And I was out there and I was like, I need to do this because this was like going to be like 10% of my income for the year. And I was like, I'm going to get coronavirus out here. I just know it. And then after that, I came back, everything just shut down, and I didn't have for 3.5 months, 4 months probably. And then in the middle of the summer, I had like one or two things trickling in. All of the big client stuff is really dried up. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of local stuff happening again, which is great. But that's mostly what it's been. It's been, instead of, 7 or 8 big projects or decent projects, it's 15 to 20 smaller projects.
Right.
Fine. I mean, I like, I'll work with anyone who wants to give me the money to do it. But it's been a weird year. And then it really, like out of nowhere, like maybe like a month and a half ago, it just shot right back up. And
that's great.
busy again, and we're finally getting to that winter slowdown again. But I've got, I've even got a shoot tomorrow. I've got, I think, one week even, and a bunch of editing that I'm working on. So it's at least.
Yeah, I noticed that ramp up because you post so much great content, like behind the scenes content on Instagram, and
I hadn't seen Adam in 6 months.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, but I was like, I could tell that Adam's working a lot on stuff recently because he's sharing a lot of great content.
Yeah. Which I had like, I gotten like a little too busy, and then my wife lovingly told me that my marketing was I'm not going to remember, nor should I probably repeat how lovingly she told me. But oh yeah, I should probably spend like 10 minutes a day trying to post on social media here and there. But,
yeah.
Oh well. Yeah, it's been a weird year, man. I'm looking forward to things getting back under control and kind of getting to some normalcy.
And it's a good reminder for freelancers that the more you can diversify in this industry, if you can do a podcast, if you can have freelance clients, and also can you make something that's sellable? Can you do stuff that's ad based? Like there's several different revenue models in video, and can you pick up at least two of them so that you're not all your eggs are in one basket?
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier that 2020 was the first year that I haven't taught a college class. That was by design. I decided to not sign up for any to do. So I could focus 100% on getting my business back up and running in a different community, 45 minutes away from where I moved. And, but I actually, I do teach courses at like the local library on occasion, on editing and other stuff like that, which has been nice. It is, not going to, I'm not going to be able to retire early from the money I make doing it. It's like teaching at the college level, but it's very fun. It's very engaging. And we've been able to kind of modify it to teach over Zoom too. So we've been doing some Zoom-based ones, which is really nice.
Yeah. Well, and my philosophy is like a lot of these little things I do on the side are not going to pay the bills. Like YouTube videos, only a small portion of people can like make a living on YouTube. Most people are not going to make a living. You're not going to quit your job, but you might make a little bit of cash on ads. But I think more importantly, like to your example about teaching at the library, like it's not going to pay your bills, but you don't know what kind of opportunities could come from that. Like you're putting yourself out in the community, you're making yourself an authority figure, like you're an expert.
Yeah.
You might meet some people that go, oh, I need a video made for my company.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons I think diversifying is important. Like doing a podcast, doing YouTube tutorials, it may not get you much revenue, but it might introduce you to someone. Just show someone that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of feel like a lot of YouTube videos that I've made over the years have led to work in unexpected ways, in ways that I couldn't have imagined. So it's kind of like, I better keep doing this because I'm not even smart enough to know what kinds of jobs could come my way, but they find me through YouTube.
Yeah. I actually just, I've had two come my way this year, and they're based on, and recently, I say this year, in the past like 6 weeks, and they've both been like based on tutorial videos that I've done, and they want videos for their project.
Right.
They're like, hey, we noticed that you do this and you live in a similar community to us. Like, why don't we talk and get this done? So yeah, I mean, like, me making some tube lights at one point led to whatever, and I've made, I don't know, like 12 cents of ad revenue for my YouTube video off of it. So it's very little, but it is, I think it helps you stay creative. And I think that in my thought on it is that it doesn't hurt anything. Like I'm not disgusting and turning away clients based on this. Like clients aren't going to like think less of me for producing videos on the side and doing this. So yeah, I think it's a great mindset to have. And I think that we probably share that because I like to do that stuff on the side. And I think it's important to have, I don't want to call them like multiple like revenue streams, but diversifying what you are doing in the industry that you are in is really important.
Yeah. And recognizing that not all return on investment is money, or, opportunities are also a return on investment. Like
Yeah.
I charge $200 an hour for shooting or editing. And so occasionally, sometimes, like, I'll have like a sponsored video. Someone's asking me to make something, and it's like, well, we're going to give you $200 to sponsor it. And I'm thinking, like, I'm going to work on this video for 14 hours. Like, I should really be getting a lot more money than this. And that's one useful way to think about your time. But if it's a project that lets me continue a relationship with this company, maybe something else will come from it. If it's a project that lets me do something really creative, that I become a more interesting filmmaker because of it. I mean, I think generally putting yourself on YouTube, even if you don't have much of an audience, like, forces you to get better on camera, and you don't know what kind of opportunities may come from it. Like, there's all sorts of ways to consider what a return on investment is.
Yeah. And it's never, I want to say it's rarely immediate either.
Yeah.
In my world or in our world. And I think that to tie it with some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, I think that it helps you, learn, whether you are, learning about something that you're doing specifically. I don't, I think it's a good way for you to keep yourself like knowledgeable about what you're doing. And as you said, like, become, like, I don't want to say maybe establish yourself is not the right word, but, um, position yourself as a authority figure in the realm that you work in your field, in
Yeah.
your industry, in your community, even, I think in some ways.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Griff, what's next for you, man? You got any fun projects you can talk about coming up?
Well, it's like, now that the election's over, I need to diversify what I'm doing at my job, because I cover a lot of, like, Trump Biden stuff. Um, but I already started doing that. Like, my latest video for the recount was about recycling,
Oh,
and kind of, I was investigating how bad Americans are at recycling plastic, which is fun because it was kind of like following one of my passions a little bit. Like, I was just remembering back to when we were in the office. I was kind of like the recycling cop. I was the one who, like, put up signs and made us get. We weren't doing, like, two distinct recycling boxes like we were supposed to in New York. And I was like, we really need to get organized here. And I put up some signs, and people started following that.
yeah, that's fun.
So,
Recycling is always a fun topic. I find myself um, dealing with a lot of recycling or similar based projects, which is neat.
yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I know way too much about recycling sometimes. And I've got and I'm like I feel like everyone just thinks I'm like the weird hippie, because I'm like, you really should recycle that, but cool. If you're working on a recycling project for the recount,
Yeah, actually, I just published that
oh, cool.
last week, and then I'm taking this week off of work for some much needed vacation time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, as long as I'm still a full-time employee with just kind of, all I really have time for is, like, my monthly podcast, and I do a few corporate gigs on the side. I just published a review video of, like, a wireless HDMI transmitter system.
I saw, what's the
That's like
Hollywoodland one or the,
Hollyland, yeah.
and yeah, thank you.
And that's the first, like, short, like, it's like a 6 minute. I'm proud of how it turned out, because I love making, like, a tight or relatively tight video like that for YouTube. So I was glad I could publish that. But yeah, I don't have much extra time for, like, passion projects these days.
Like 2,000 hour sriracha that you're.
Yeah. Although, like, that, passion projects are important, because that video kind of led to a lot of the career I have now.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. Yeah, I want to briefly talk about, when you're creating these, like, YouTube videos, there's always, like, such a weird, at least I feel like there's a weird pressure to make them over 10 minutes, because then you get, like, the double, like, ad revenue.
Oh, I don't even know.
Yeah, it's like
You're probably right.
over 10 minutes, I think. For those of you unfamiliar with YouTube videos, if it's over like 10 minutes, you get like one additional ad in there, but whatever. So you get a little bit more money. You get a couple extra cents. But I hate when I have a video and I'm like, I could give this in 5-6 minutes. It's a nice tight one. It's good. And then you are like, well, I mean, like, again, I make like $40 on YouTube a year, you know, like
Yeah.
was going to be $42 if I make it a 10-minute video.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, peanuts in the grand scheme of things. But I always find myself struggling with, I feel like I talk really quick in real life and I do things like that. And then when I make these videos, I feel like the feedback that I get is that like sometimes they're too fast. So I want to let things breathe, but then I'm also like, I don't want it to be a 10 or 12-minute video if it doesn't have to be. I don't
Right.
ever struggle with that, to be honest.
Well, and I think you have to find the balance of like, you could take some feedback from the audience and change your style, but also you want to make the videos that make you happy. Like I like fast moving stuff and everything I make is really tight. And I do occasionally catch myself thinking like, I probably could have had a little Nat sound break there, or let that breathe. But my instinct is to just cut the voiceover tight and move this thing along.
Like hit pause if it's going too fast, bro. That's how I feel. But again, I also, you know, I don't, I'm a people pleaser at some, you know, sometimes to a fault. And I always I find myself struggling with that sometimes when I've got a couple of review videos that I've been working on here and there. And I'm like, oh, I really want this, but it's only like 3 minutes. And I'm like, is that even, you know, worth it? Should I add more to it? Things like that. But
I will say, I think your instinct for what to make tutorial videos about is really great. Like every time I see you post
oh, well,
anything, any how-to thing that you post, it's like you can tell you care about it, and it's also like generally kind of unique. And DIY stuff is always fun. Watching you build stuff is great.
that's very sweet. I'm blushing over here if you're listening. My face just got a little flush. That's very sweet of you.
It's also just like, and you can also just tell. I think this is what I love about how-to videos. Like, it just comes from a place of actual empathy, where you're like, this thing that I know how to do is kind of cool, and I became, a subject matter expert in this thing, even if it was briefly in my life, and to be able to share with someone else, because I think you might get something out of it.
Yeah.
And I just feel that through what you share as behind the scenes content. You're not just sharing it to be like, hey, look at the cool thing I got to do. You share it because you're like, I think you might learn something from this or care about this.
I try to. I mean, like, I think going back to, say just picking out my like LED tube lights. I looked at lights. I was like, oh, these look cool. They're not too expensive to buy. I could buy them. But
Yeah.
like, it's just a tube with lights crammed in it. So, at the end of the day. So I sat down and sketched out how to do it. And then I did. I had to become like a subject matter expert in lighting. And I made like 7 or 8 of these things before I started filming. And I had to I was making essentially prototypes and seeing how they worked, seeing what parts melted and what parts didn't.
Yeah.
I was getting feedback from people that, have backgrounds in electricity or electricians, you might call them, some people call them. And yeah. And it was a lot. And I was just like, and that one, I went into it knowing that I wanted to make these to share with people in a sense to a point. But yeah, that's very sweet. I really appreciate that. That's very high praise. And I will gladly accept it. That's very nice. And I mean, I feel the same way, like, when I watch videos, it's the stuff that you do, I think something that fascinates me is that when you watch a tutorial video or something from someone else, you're like, man, I never even thought of doing that. And and I love when that happens. And for sure, I get that a lot with you. I mean, there's some other, YouTubers that I'm like, oh man, how do their brains work like this?
Yeah.
So it's great to hear that that's reciprocal.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Well, yeah, I try to remember that everyone's filmmaking experience is different, and that there are probably things that I do that are quirky, and they seem straightforward to me. But like one of my favorite videos that I made years ago was called the invisible mic trick.
Oh yeah.
And it was about putting a mic right in the frame, like a mic like this, and then masking it out in an interview setting. And it was something that I just started developing. I'd been doing for years on my own. And I don't think I knew that it was weird.
Yeah.
And until I made a video about it, I got all this feedback. It was like, just, mind blown sort of feedback. People were like, I never would have thought about that. And I realized like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't know maybe I invented that.
Yeah, isn't that wild? I actually have a way that I mic people up with lavaliers, and I'm going to make a video. I'm finishing kind of some script notes on it, but I'm like, the way someone saw me mic someone up one time, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, "So I mic them up."
Yeah.
It's where you put your hand up their shirt Um, but I actually used your microphone trick for, I had a client that couldn't get their lines down. So I just held in front of them the sheet of paper with what they had to read. And then I made
Yeah.
myself out. But I was,
Yeah.
here you go, man. You can read it.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant trick, man. And I was like, it happened around the exact same time that your microphone trick came out. And I was like, I mean, you would never know that you were just standing in frame with your,
Right.
or whatever doing.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I've had CEOs where they just like freeze up. I mean, this is a common occurrence in freelancing, I imagine. And so my backup is always, if I just can't get them to say a line on camera and look normal while they say it, which can be surprisingly hard.
Risk. That's what the big part there. Look normal.
Yeah. My backup is always just like hand them the script and just get them to read it into the microphone. And we will get some beauty shots of them. And we can, we'll edit that part differently. It won't be an interview. It'll just be like their voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I started bringing my, like an 85 millimeter lens, like a portrait lens that I do headshots with, and, to shoots, because the same thing, and it's for whatever reason it happens. It's probably because they have a lot of stuff on their minds, but it happens to be like CEOs, I feel like, or presidents a lot.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, what am I supposed to say? And then I'll just and I will tape the notes like right under the lens. And then when they look at them, I'm like, just read, don't look back up at the lens, but like I'm far enough.
Right.
The eye line is not that different.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for.
Yeah. And you're right. The key is to get them not to look back at the lens. Then you'll notice that they're looking at something else.
And I was like, yeah, just just read that thing down. But this is more of a pain, but I actually just bought this like tiny little teleprompter. It's called like a Parrot teleprompter.
Yeah. I've seen that one. It looks great.
It's great. And you can upload, upload stuff to your phone and change it right then and there and put it in. Using that a little bit, but the problem that I've had is that, as you well know, reading off of a teleprompter is not a skill that people just are innately born with.
Right.
So there is more time spent trying to get the right speed and like teach them how to read off of a teleprompter. I've taken it to a couple of shoots just to have it as a backup, but I rarely ever tell them about it. But it's a really easy way to get someone to look right at the lens and read, something that they're supposed to read.
Right.
And you got to get them to normal.
I built a teleprompter years ago, and it was a fun project, and it made a fun tutorial video out of it. But in the end, once I started using it, I pretty much realized it just like sucked all my emotion out. It became clinical reading, and I would just, if I memorized a sentence and said it to you, it would always be more impactful than me reading that sentence.
Yeah. And you've been on the teleprompter this whole podcast.
Yes.
Okay, that's right. Robotic today, man. Really robotic. No, it's I remember that tutorial because I ended up like looking on like Craigslist for like one-way glass for like 6 months afterwards. I was like, where can I find like cheap one-way glass or whatever?
Well, and to come full circle, the funny thing about you mentioning Parrot, I could be getting the companies wrong, but I'm pretty sure Parrot, I met the guy who makes those.
Oh, cool.
At NAB, and he said he was inspired to make them by my YouTube tutorial video.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Like he watched that and was like, oh, there is a need for like a small DIY teleprompter. I can make those.
That's pretty wild, man. What a small world. And this is the first one that I've seen that's like really portable. I mean, for years, these teleprompters, like 2 feet by 2 feet, and they're like bigger than my laptop. And they're just so, I mean, you have your own Pelican case to transport them in.
Yeah.
And I never felt like any of them ever fucking worked right the way I wanted them to. There's always an issue with them. And this little one has been great. I mean, it's really like, I don't have it on me, but it takes up less space than like a V-mount battery that I have in my hand. I mean, it's really small, and it connects directly to your lens and uses your smartphone.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I've just developed a style where I write it. My scripts are always like one sentence on camera and then the B-roll starts. And so I have like 4 lines in a script highlighted in green, and those are the ones I need to do on camera. And so I sit here, I do my 4 lines memorized one at a time, and then I take the microphone to another room, or sometimes I record it right here to match the audio. And it feels like I memorized a script.
I do the exact same thing, man. I give myself the notes to, on camera, VO, so I know what I have to record, and it makes it super easy. Cool. Griffin, I don't want to take any more of your time, man. I appreciate you chatting today. In case,
Yeah, this was fun.
yeah, really, very, very nice. It's been a while since we've seen each other and gotten an opportunity to chat, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get together and have a drink or
Yeah. Now that we're living in the same state again, now that I'm back in Illinois.
Griffin's my neighbor, actually. We're my actual neighbor just gave me a weird look because I was waving.
There's actually this is not Zoom. We're sitting across from each other this whole time.
One of a friend of mine here in town, he only lives like 2 blocks away, and we had to do it over Zoom because it was like right in the height of COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Like, hey, Tom. Griffin, if people want to check out your work or get in touch with you or anything like that, how can they do that?
Yeah. Well, you can probably find most of these things at just griffinhammond.com. That's where my podcast is. It's also on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/griffinhammond. That's also where I posted my latest review video. But if you're looking for my recount stuff, you should probably just go to twitter.com/therecount or go to twitter.com/griffin, because pretty much all I post on my Twitter timeline is just all the videos I make for the recount.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in stuff like recycling and electoral college, and
who is not?
Yeah.
No, those videos are really good. Like I said, I found myself watching them daily.
Well, and my recycling one is fun because I decided I shoot it in this exact same setup, and I had my recycling can right here behind me, and I decided to start the video by tossing something over my shoulder, but of course I missed like 20 times, so I made a little outtake reel on my Twitter.
That's fun. I did see that. I did see your horrible behind the back basketball skills.
Real bad.
Cool, man. Well, Griffin, thank you again, truly, for taking the time to chat with me today. And I really appreciate all the info and our ongoing friendship that we have.
Yes. Yeah. And when all this, when the world gets back to normal, I'd like to see you in person soon.
Yeah. Likewise, man. Well, thanks again, buddy. And have a good day. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, and a pleasant rest of 2020 if I don't get to chat with you anymore this year. And
yeah. Happy holidays.
Yeah, likewise. All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later. Okay.
See ya.